This summer, my family took a vacation. We drove to South Dakota. And as we started driving, I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. Because after a while, I heard those words, those phrases that parents really do not enjoy, that just start chiming in from the back seat. Theme and variation on, are we there yet? When will we get there? How much longer? There are a few honorable mentions amongst the things that parents don't want to hear while driving on vacation, which would include things like, I need to go to the bathroom, usually occurring just about 3 miles after you've passed the closest exit. But those are the big ones, all right? Are we there yet? We have been following the journey of Abram over these last weeks. We've hit the are we there yet stage. As Abram is taking this long trip that God has called him to, Abram has journeyed. He's left his father's land. He's settled. He's gone to Egypt. He's come back from Egypt. He's settled down again. He saved his nephew Lot from captivity. And he's still not there yet. What he's driving towards, the thing that Abram is trying to get towards, is he has been told that he will be the father of many nations. And thus far, he isn't the father of any nations, any children at all. So I really don't blame Abram for yielding to the temptation to chime in from the back seat, chiming into God and saying, are we there yet? So this is what we read. It's in Genesis 15. After these things, all the things that have been happening, out of go to the new land, Egypt, back, and after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, do not fear, Abram. I'm a shield to you. Your reward will be great. And Abram said, O Lord, what wilt thou give me, since I am childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, since thou hast given me no offspring, one born in my house is my heir. And so this is where Abram's at. He doesn't see how they're going to get there, right? The person who's going to inherit his household is not a descendant, not of his family. It's someone who's in his household, but it's not one of his children. And what I hear there, as Abram asks, hear him saying, are we there yet? Like, how long until we get there? How long until we get to the point where I have children? And the response is fascinating. Then behold, the word of the Lord came to Abram, saying, this man will not be your heir, but one who shall come forth from your own body, he shall be your heir. And God took Abram outside and said, now look towards the heaven, count the stars, if you are able to count them. And God said to Abram, so shall your descendants be. What type of answer is this? It's not the answer that Abram is looking for. Right? It's not the answer of we'll be there in 3 hours, stop asking. Right? It's not the answer of you'll have a child in 2 years, stop asking. It's not a lot of details. This is not the Google Maps detailed response. This is a different type of answer. This is the answer of your mom planned this trip and she did a great job. This trip is going to be one that we will remember for years, so just sit tight. All right? That's the type of answer this is. All right? Look at the stars. Look up to the stars. I, the Lord your God, planned all those stars. I ordered them, and they are gorgeous. And if I can plan and order such a gorgeous thing as the stars in the sky, I can plan what will happen with you and your children. And you will have children. Abram. And Abram responds. Thus, Abram believed in the Lord, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. That verse, it's always interesting to me how many more words it takes in English to do what Hebrew can do with just a few words. That entire verse is 5 words in Hebrew. He believed, God thought, Abram good. All right, that's sort of a literalist translation of that verse, just 5 words. And there's been a lot of ink spilled over those 5 words. The way that a lot of people have interpreted them in different ways, those 5 words. The way that I try to figure out such moments is to look at the story, the context, what's happening, right? What helps me get my mind around how they understood it in the moment. And if you look at what has happened thus far, God had invited Abram to take a journey and to give Abram the land. Abram has taken the journey and then responded to the gift by giving 10% to Melchizedek, right? And so the two sort of parties, you might say, have both taken some steps towards each other. They have shown over time, if you think about the amount of time this has been a bit, right? This has been a bit of time they've been committed to each other, right? And so they are showing that they are committed to each other. And what do we say when you have two people who are committed to each other, who are getting to know each other, who now know each other fairly well? We have a word for that. We call that a relationship. When you know someone, you spend time with somebody. It's when you're good with somebody, right? That's how you might put it. That's how I put it, right? That Abram believed what God was laying out. And at that moment, the give and take of relationship has occurred often enough that they can say, they are good with each other. Abram is good. Abram believes God, and Abram is squared up with, is good. They're solid. They can depend on each other. They're in a relationship. And it's not just any type of relationship. Right? This relationship that God knows that Abram is going to hold up his end, is willing to march into the unknown for him, and Abram knows that the God who designed the stars is going to make sure that his family does prosper, even if he's not quite sure exactly how it's going to unfold. Right? This relationship, this important relationship we call a covenant. That's what we read. It's in Genesis 15:18. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, right? Covenants are a type of relationship. Like if we want to formalize a relationship today, we'll sign a piece of paper. Like when people get married here, we sign the marriage certificate, and that marks that the new relationship has begun. But this is something a step above and beyond that. This is not something that you sign into being. You don't sign a contract here, you cut a covenant. That's the verb that goes with covenant. You cut it. And so down the road, the covenant will be cut into the stone of the 10 Commandments. And in this moment right here, the covenant is cut into numerous animals. Like Abram is told, bring these animals that you have, one each of a goat, heifer, pigeon, a bunch of different types of animals that he brings, and he cuts them in half. And I have to confess that there's a sense in which we've lost some of the details that make sense of this moment. Like we know a covenant is cut and these animals are cut, and in the midst of these animals comes like this moment of flame, much like the flame that leads the Hebrew people through the desert. Like we know that, so God is showing up in the cutting of these animals. Like we know something is happening here, but with most of Scripture, we understand with the history and the context and our understanding of Hebrew and our understanding of how to read Scripture well, we can say, this is what's happening. This is one of the very few times where we look at it and say, we're missing some things. Like we're not absolutely certain. The best we can say that is a covenant is cut here, as the animals are cut. And it marks this relationship, this long-term relationship between Abram and God. That changes Abram's future, it changes our future. Now, I wish that I could jump straight from here to the birth of Isaac. It would be nice to take that shortcut, but that's not how it works. There aren't shortcuts. There are no shortcuts in relationships, and that is what Abram is about to learn the hard way. He knows that there will be many people who will call him father, as many as there are stars in the sky, but he doesn't know when that will begin, and Sarai is not getting any younger. And so Sarai says to him, you need an heir. And we have this woman Hagar, who is my maidservant. Why don't you have a child with her? we'll see if we can get the ball rolling on this. And as you might guess, this is not the heir that they're waiting for. The heir needs to be the child of Abraham and Sarah. And this does go poorly. Hagar and Sarai stop getting along once the child is born, and Abram really doesn't step in to handle this or help do what he can. He doesn't kind of washes his hands of it. It's not a good situation. Down the road, though, after a few more years, after they're having to deal with the fallout from the shortcut they tried to take with Hagar, 3 strangers show up to tell Abram that this time next year, Sarai will have had a child. She laughs at this, and so ends up being what the child is named, Laughter. Isaac means laughter. And so the promise is fulfilled. Abram is on the land which he has been promised, and he has a child that calls him father, and he will be the father of many nations, beginning with Isaac. Looking at this, we see both the powerful commitment and the deep relationship that is marked here. The commitment of Abram and God, the relationship that grows out of that. This relationship, this covenant, begins once both sides have held true to each other over time. And this seems to get at the punchline, at least for me, of reading this, is that it's the over time part. Relationships cannot be rushed. It just doesn't work. When Sarai and Abram attempt to rush, they know where they're going to land, that the stars, as many as stars in the sky, you will have children, that the people who call you father will be your family, like that. They know where they're landing, but they're in a hurry to get there, and they want to get there now, on their terms, quickly. And that's when things go poorly. That's, take this shortcut, like have this child with this woman Hagar, and we'll get the ball rolling right now, like we'll get it done. And it doesn't go well. I can tell you that for me, the stars in the sky, the thing that I'm leaning into, the thing that I hope for in this life, I can summarize it rather concisely, right? I want to be a good father, husband, pastor. And when I say good, what I mean is Christ-like. That following Jesus is the norm for how I do the rest. That because I follow Jesus, I want to be, that will make me a good father, husband, and pastor. And what I've realized about all of these is that they are relationships with my children, with my wife, with the people that I serve, with the Lord that I follow, and that just like Abram and Sarai, there are no shortcuts. There aren't. It took them years, it took them even decades for them to be ready to be the parents to Isaac, to learn what they needed to learn to be able to raise him well, right? And when they attempted a shortcut, they had to learn that there are no shortcuts, right? Because it blew up on them. They had to learn that, right? They had to learn to hold on to a promise, to be able to look to the stars and trust that it would work out. They might not know how, but to hold on to that promise of the stars. And I think that is true for us as well. Some things don't change. There are no shortcuts. Being a good parent takes being there with and for our children day after day. Being a good husband, being a good spouse takes being there day in and day out. Being a good pastor takes being here day in, day out. And by here, I mean in this community, not necessarily right here in this space. Being a disciple of Jesus takes being here with him and going to follow him day in and day out. Showing up, being there, there's no shortcut to doing that. There's no shortcut to building a relationship. There's no shortcut to following God's promises. This is not always easy. But maybe what I need to do more often is to do what Abram learned to do, is to step out and look at the stars. To step out and look at the stars and remember that the God who put all those stars in order will put our lives in order as well, even if we don't see how. Not yet. Maybe even if we're not going to see for quite a long time. But maybe we can hold on to that. Maybe tonight after the sun sets, after the moon rises, maybe this would be a night to take a moment to step outside, to look up the stars, and be reminded of who it is that we are in a relationship with, who it is that we're in a covenant with, a covenant that cuts across the grain of our lives, that shapes our future, such that we can look at those stars and understand that God has made a promise. But there are no shortcuts to the fulfillment of those promises. For the promise is that he will be in relationship with us. The promise is that that relationship will change our lives from now until eternity. Thanks be to God. Amen.